The sun was just beginning to rise over Manila, turning the gray sky into shades of pink and gold. Jeepneys roared to life, vendors lifted the shutters on their stalls, and the streets filled with the familiar rhythm of another day, chaotic, alive, and raw. But in the corner of Quiapo's narrow market street, amid the noise of engines and the chatter of morning crowds, a voice began to rise. It wasn't loud at first, almost hesitant, like it didn't belong among the honking and shouting. Yet, something about it made people turn. A melody drifted through the humid air, smooth and aching with soul. The voice carried the nostalgia of another time. Wise men say only fools rush in. That voice belonged to Rico Alvarez, a 28-year-old street singer with a second-hand guitar and shoes that had seen too many rainy seasons. His shirt was faded, his hair uncombed, but his voice could have filled a cathedral. Every morning, Rico would find his corner near the small chapel. He'd lean against the cracked wall, close his eyes, and sing songs that spoke to the broken hearts of strangers. Some days, he made enough coins to buy rice and a little meat for dinner. Other days, he'd go home with only a few pesos, his stomach empty but his spirit still unbroken. Because Rico wasn't just singing for himself. He was singing for Lara, his 9-year-old sister. She had been born with a weak heart, and after their parents passed away in a bus accident 3 years ago, Rico had become her world. He was mother, father, brother, and provider, all in one. Every night, when Lara's breathing grew heavy from fatigue, he would sit beside her, strumming the same old guitar their father once owned. She'd smile and whisper, "Kuya, sing Elvis again," and he would softly, lovingly, because for them, Elvis wasn't just music, it was hope. That morning as the crowd gathered around, an old woman dropped a few coins into his open guitar case. "Rico, that voice of yours, it's a blessing," she said with a smile. He bowed slightly grateful. "Salamat po, Tita Lorna." He began another song, his voice rising with emotion. "Take my hand, take my whole life too." Across the street, a group of teenage boys stopped their basketball game to listen. A jeepney driver rolled down his window and smiled. For those few minutes the entire street seemed to pause, because in a city where everyone was rushing to survive, Rico reminded them to feel. When the song ended, people clapped. A little girl tugged on her mother's arm, asking for another song. Rico smiled shyly, tuning his guitar. He didn't speak much, but when he sang, his heart spoke for him. Then among the crowd someone stood recording him with a phone. A tall, middle-aged tourist, pale-skinned, sun hat, kind eyes, watched with fascination. He whispered to his wife, "He sounds just like Elvis, no better. There's something real in his voice." The woman nodded, pressing record. Rico didn't notice. He was lost in his song. After they left, he packed up his things, counting his coins, just enough for medicine and a little food. He smiled to himself. That was enough. Back home, their home wasn't much, a small wooden shack with a leaking roof and a single electric bulb that flickered when it rained. But inside there was warmth. Lara lay on a thin mattress, sketching on the back of old newspapers. She looked up as Rico entered. "Kuya, did people like your songs today?" Rico knelt beside her, brushing her hair from her face. "They always like your Kuya's songs," he said playfully. She laughed, a small, fragile laugh that made his chest tighten. He handed her the medicine. "Here, don't forget." As she swallowed the pills she looked at him with innocent pride. "You'll be famous one day, Kuya. Just wait, maybe Simon Cowell will see you." Rico chuckled, shaking his head. "Simon Cowell, from Britain's Got Talent. Lara, that's for real stars, not for people like me." But she shook her head seriously. "You are a star. You just don't know it yet." He sat down beside her, picking up his guitar again. The same guitar their father played every Sunday night before everything changed. The wood was cracked, the strings rusted, but when Rico strummed it sounded like hope reborn. He sang softly, his voice trembling with emotion. Lara closed her eyes, mouthing the words, "For I can't help falling in love with you." When the song ended, she whispered, "That one's for Mama and Papa, right?" He nodded, his throat tight. "Always." Outside, the wind rustled through the palm leaves, carrying the sound of Manila's nightlife. Vendors calling out prices, children laughing in the distance, a stray dog barking. It was a life filled with struggle, but also with quiet miracles. As Rico stepped outside to look at the stars, he prayed silently, "Lord, I don't ask for fame, I just want my sister to live. Let me sing as long as I have a voice." He didn't know that prayer had already been heard. Because the video, the one recorded by the Irish tourist, had just been uploaded to the internet. By the next morning, thousands of people across Europe were watching it. They didn't see a poor man in a tattered shirt, they saw a soul singing through the pain. Comments flooded in. "Who is this guy? That's better than any Elvis cover I've heard. This man deserves the world." And somewhere in Dublin, a producer for Ireland's Got Talent clicked the video. He leaned back, stunned. "Get me this man," he said quietly. "We're flying him here." But back in Manila, Rico knew none of this. He was humming softly to himself, wiping his guitar with care. He looked over at his sleeping sister, her chest rising gently with every breath, and smiled. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "we sing again." He didn't know that by the next sunrise, his life would never be the same. The first thing Rico noticed when he woke up that morning was the sound of his sister coughing. It wasn't the soft, sleepy cough she usually had, it was deep, strained, like her small lungs were fighting for every breath. He sat up quickly, brushing the sleep from his eyes, and hurried to her side. "Lara, hey, he said softly, his voice trembling. "Breathe slow, okay, Kuya's here." Her eyes fluttered open, weak but still filled with that same spark. "It's okay, Koya, just the morning one." Rico smiled gently, though his heart ached. "Then it's breakfast time." Breakfast of course meant rice and salt, and if he was lucky, maybe a banana from the vendor who sometimes let him pay later. But that morning, even as he scooped rice into a bowl, something felt different. The street outside seemed louder than usual. People were shouting, laughing, calling out his name. He stepped out, still holding the spoon. "What's happening?" he asked, confused. "Rico! Rico!" shouted a teenage boy from across the alley. "You're on Facebook! Bro, you're viral!" Rico blinked. "I'm what?" The boy rushed over, shoving his cracked phone into Rico's hands. There on the small screen, was a video, his video. He saw himself standing in the corner of Quiapo, singing "Can't Help Falling in Love," eyes closed, lost in the moment. The caption read, "This poor Filipino street singer sounds like Elvis reborn." The video already had over 1 million views. Rico's heart pounded. He scrolled through the comments, his hands shaking. Goosebumps all over. "He sings with his soul. Someone needs to find this man. I'm crying. He deserves better." He felt dizzy. Is this real? The boy grinned. "Koya, Rico, you're famous now." By afternoon, the news had reached the whole barangay. Street vendors left their stalls to congratulate him, and children followed him, calling out Elvis Encanto. But fame, to Rico, didn't mean much, not when Lara's medicine was running out and the rent was due. He sat beside her that evening showing her the video. She gasped when she saw the views. "Koya, that's you!
You're on the internet?
Look at all those hearts." He laughed softly. "Maybe it's just for fun. It won't change much." But Lara shook her head. "It's a sign, Koya. Mama always said God moves in mysterious ways." He smiled, ruffling her hair. "Maybe he does." That night, as rain began to pour over the tin roofs, Rico's old phone started to buzz. He thought it was a scam at first, but then a woman's voice spoke in a clear accented English. "Hello, may I speak with Mr. Rico Alvarez?" "This is Rico," he replied, uncertain. "Hi, Rico. My name is Claire O'Sullivan. I'm a producer with Ireland's Got Talent. Have you heard of the show?" Rico froze. The spoon in his hand fell to the floor. Yes ma'am, but I think you have the wrong number." No mistake," she said warmly. "We saw your video online. Simon Cowell himself asked us to reach out. We would love to invite you to audition here in Dublin." For a moment, Rico couldn't breathe. He looked at Lara, who was watching him with wide eyes. "Ireland," he whispered. That's across the world." "Yes," Claire said gently. "We'll handle your travel. You just need a passport and a heart full of music." Rico didn't speak for several seconds. He was too overwhelmed. Mom, I can't afford anything, not even a proper suit, and my sister is sick, I can't leave her alone." There was silence on the line for a moment. Then Claire said softly, "Rico, sometimes life gives us one miracle to change everything. Take this chance, you'll honor your sister, and yourself." When the call ended, Rico just sat there in disbelief. Lara grabbed his hands, eyes bright with excitement. "Kuya, you're going to Ireland! You'll be on TV! You'll meet Simon Cowell!" He laughed through tears. "I don't even have shoes that aren't broken." She took his face in her small hands. "Then we'll fix them. We'll make them shine." The next few days were a whirlwind. Rico went to the city office to apply for a passport. It cost more than he could afford. But when his neighbors heard why he needed it, something beautiful happened. The fruit vendor down the street pressed a few bills into his hand. "For your ticket, Rico. Go make us proud." The tricycle driver added coins from his day's earnings. "Sing like the Angles, brother." Even the kids who once teased him offered their saved-up coins, wrapped in candy wrappers. By evening, a small crowd had gathered in front of his shack, holding candles, singing songs. It wasn't a farewell, it was a celebration. One man, an older street guitarist who'd known Rico for years, placed his own guitar pick in Rico's hand. "You'll need this more than I do." Rico looked around at the faces glowing in the candlelight. People who had little, yet gave everything they could. His throat tightened. "Why are you all doing this?" he asked softly. A woman answered, "Because you've been singing hope for us all these years. Now it's our turn to sing for you." The night before his flight, Rico couldn't sleep. He sat outside strumming softly while Lara leaned against his shoulder. "Kuya," she whispered, "when you get there, don't be scared, okay? Just sing like you always do." He nodded, his eyes misting. "And you'll watch me on TV?" She smiled. "Always." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "You're the reason I sing, Lara. Every song, it's for you." As dawn approached, he packed his guitar, a few clothes, and the little cross necklace his mother gave him. When the taxi arrived, half the neighborhood came to wave him off. Lara hugged him tightly, refusing to let go until the very last second. "Promise me you'll come back," she whispered. "I promise," he said, voice trembling. "And when I do, As the car drove away, she stood in the street barefoot, waving with both hands, tears streaming down her face. But her smile never faded. Inside the taxi, Rico looked out at the fading lights of Manila. His heart was a storm of fear and faith. He didn't know what awaited him in Ireland. He didn't know if he was good enough, or if he even belonged on a stage that big. But one thing he did know: he carried the voices of everyone who believed in him. The laughter of the children, the prayers of the old, the hope of a sister who saw a star where the world saw a beggar. He gripped his guitar and whispered, "Lord, if this is your plan, let me make them proud." The plane would take him across oceans, but it was faith, the pure kind born from struggle, that would carry him further than he'd ever dreamed. The air outside the Dublin airport was cold, colder than anything Rico had ever felt. He stepped out of the terminal, clutching his worn guitar case tightly, his breath turning to mist in the Irish wind. The grey sky hung low, heavy with clouds, but to him, it felt like heaven itself had opened a door. He looked around, wide-eyed at the world of polished cars, glowing billboards and people dressed in warm coats. His shoes, repaired with tape, crunched on the pavement as he followed a kind production assistant holding a sign with his name. Ricey Alvarez, Ireland's Got Talent. For a poor street singer from Manila, even the air smelled different here, clean, distant, like opportunity itself. Inside the van, as the city rolled by, Rico pressed his forehead to the window. He whispered softly to himself, "Lara, we made it." In his pocket he carried a small photo of his sister. She had drawn it herself before he left, a simple crayon picture of the two of them holding guitars, surrounded by stars. Beneath it, she had written, "Sing for Mama, Papa and me." He touched the drawing now, and the courage returned to his heart. When he arrived at the theater, his nerves began to unravel. The building was enormous, the lights dazzling. Contestants walked around dressed in shimmering costumes, vocal coaches giving last-minute tips, cameras following every move. Rico stood near the entrance, uncertain, wearing the same simple jeans and a borrowed suit jacket from a church friend in Manila. He tried to steady his breathing. "You belong here, Rico," he told himself. "You have a song to sing." A cheerful staff member approached. "Rico Alvarez?" she asked with a bright smile. "You'll be going on in about an hour. Are you ready?" He nodded nervously. I think so, ma'am." She chuckled kindly. "Don't think. Just sing your heart out." Backstage, he could hear the muffled roar of the audience through the curtains. Every clap and cheer made his heart race faster. He peeked out, catching a glimpse of the judges' table. There they were, Louis Walsh, Denise Van Outen and Simon Cowell himself. Rico froze. He'd seen Simon's face 100 times on TV, judging the biggest stars in the world. Now that same man would decide his fate. He whispered a quick prayer under his breath, gripping his small cross necklace. "Lord, please, not for fame. Just let my song touch someone tonight." Then the stage manager signaled him. "You're up next, Rico." He stepped into the blinding lights. The vastness of the theater made his knees weak. The crowd fell silent, curious. A spotlight followed him to the center of the stage. He adjusted the microphone, his trembling hands betraying his nerves. Simon raised an eyebrow. "Hello there," he said. "What's your name, and where are you from?" Rico swallowed hard. "My name is Rico Alvarez. I'm from Manila, Philippines." There was a soft murmur from the audience. A Filipino man, halfway across the world, standing before them with a guitar that looked older than he was. It already felt like a story. Simon leaned back. "And what do you do back home, Rico?" "I sing on the streets, sir," Rico said honestly. "For my sister." Something shifted in the room. The sincerity in his voice was impossible to ignore. Simon nodded slowly. "All right. Good luck, Rico. Let's hear what you've got." Rico closed his eyes. For a moment, he could hear Manila again. The traffic, the laughter, the sound of his sister humming along. Then he strummed the first chord of "Can't Help Falling in Love." His voice started soft, almost fragile. But as the melody filled the theater, it began to bloom, warm, soulful. Wise men say, only fools rush in. Every note carried a story, of hunger, of love, of nights spent singing under flickering streetlights. The crowd leaned in, captivated. The world outside that stage melted away. He sang the chorus with a tremor in his voice, his eyes glistening. "Take my hand, take my whole life too." And in that moment, it was as if Elvis himself was reborn, not in style but in soul. It wasn't an imitation, it was a resurrection of honesty, of heart. By the final verse, Rico's voice quivered with emotion. He thought of Lara, of her tiny hands clapping when he practiced at home, of her whispering, "Sing like the angels, Koya." He finished softly, "For I can't help falling in love with you." Silence followed. Then, a heartbeat later, the crowd erupted. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even crying. The camera zoomed in on Simon Cowell's face. He wasn't smiling, not yet. He was just staring, eyes glassy, almost stunned. Finally Simon stood, and when he did, the crowd roared even louder. That, he said slowly, was beautiful. The other judges nodded in agreement. Denise wiped a tear from her eye. Louis leaned toward the mic, saying, "Rico, you came here all the way from Manila. But tonight, you brought the heart of the Philippines to Ireland." The Rico stood frozen, his hand covering his mouth, overwhelmed. The crowd began to chant his name. Rico! Rico! He bowed deeply, tears streaming down his cheeks. Thank you so much," he said through sobs. Simon finally smiled, his voice breaking slightly as he said, "Rico, that was better than Elvis. Because it wasn't an act, it was your soul." The words hit him like sunlight breaking through clouds. He fell to his knees, clutching his guitar, whispering a prayer of thanks. After the show backstage, the crew surrounded him with applause. Someone handed him water, another gave him a warm blanket for the cold. But all Rico wanted was to call home. He borrowed a phone from a staff member and dialed Lara's neighbor. The call connected, and a small, breathless voice came through the line.
"Kuya, I saw you! Everyone was watching!"
"You were amazing." Rico couldn't stop crying. "Did you hear what Simon said?"
"Yes! He said you're better than Elvis!"
she squealed. "Kuya, you did it!" He laughed through his tears, his voice trembling. "No, we did it, Lara. You, me, mama, papa, everyone back home. We all sang tonight," she giggled. "Then keep singing, Kuya. The world needs to hear you." "I will," he whispered. "I promise." As he hung up, Rico looked down at his hands, the same hands that once strummed on street corners for a few coins. Now they had held the world's attention, even if just for a few minutes. He walked outside into the crisp Dublin night, the wind brushing his face. The city lights sparkled like stars, and for the first time, he didn't feel small, he felt infinite. He took out Lara's crayon drawing and looked at it under the streetlight. He smiled. "You were right, little one," he murmured. "Maybe Simon Cowell did see me." But deep inside, Rico knew it wasn't Simon who had truly seen him, it was the people, the hearts who recognized something pure in his voice. And as the night carried his breath into the cold Irish air, he realized something powerful. He hadn't just crossed oceans, he had crossed despair itself, and turned it into music. The stage lights still burned bright, but the applause had not yet faded. It rolled through the theater like a wave, loud, unstoppable, and alive. Rico stood frozen in the center of it all, still clutching his guitar as if afraid it would disappear. His knees trembled, he could barely hear himself think over the roar of the crowd. Tears filled his eyes, blurring the sea of faces before him. For a second, it was no longer the shining theater in Dublin. It was Quiapo, his corner, his people clapping from the sidewalks. He could almost hear the laughter of street kids, the clang of jeepneys, and his sister's soft voice calling out, "Sing one more song, Koya." A voice broke through the applause, strong, distinct, and familiar. Simon Cowell leaned forward, his face unreadable at first. The audience fell silent, waiting. Then Simon spoke, his tone softer than anyone had ever heard it. "You know, Rico, I've heard a lot of singers try to be Elvis, but what you just did," he paused, his eyes glistening under the stage lights, "was better than Elvis, because Elvis sang with style, but you sang with your soul." The crowd erupted again, louder than before. Rico's hand flew to his mouth as he tried to hold back sobs. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Simon Cowell, the man known for breaking dreams more than building them, had just said he was better than Elvis. Simon continued, his voice filled with admiration. "When you walked out here, I didn't know what to expect, but you've reminded every single one of us why we love music. It's not about fame or money, it's about truth. And tonight, you were truth." Denise Van Outen was wiping tears from her cheeks. "Rico," she said, smiling warmly, "I've judged this show for years, and I don't think I've ever seen someone so genuine. You sang every note like a prayer. That was divine." Louis Walsh leaned closer to his mic. "And to come all the way from Manila, with nothing but your heart and that old guitar, and to do this, you've given hope to so many people tonight, the world will remember your name." Rico stood there, his heart pounding, unsure of what to do or say. His lips trembled as he spoke softly into the mic. Thank you, sir, thank you, ma'am." He looked up toward the audience, voice cracking with emotion. I sing for my little sister back home. She's sick. She told me to come here and sing with my heart, so this is for her, for my sister Laura." The crowd fell quiet listening. He continued, his voice shaking. "She always said maybe Simon Cowell will hear me one day, and now." He laughed through his tears. Now he did. The audience cheered, many standing on their feet again. Simon smiled, an unguarded, human smile. "Tell your sister," he said, "that she was right." As the music swelled for the next segment, Rico was guided offstage by the production crew, but the applause still followed him down the corridor. People clapped him on the back, some in tears, others speechless. Cameramen ran past him, capturing his every expression. Backstage, the host of the show ran up, microphone in hand. Rico Alvarez, everyone! You just got a standing ovation from the entire hall. And from Simon Cowell. How does it feel? Rico shook his head in disbelief, still crying. It feels like a dream, like God heard me. The host smiled. You've touched millions tonight. Your video already has hundreds of thousands of views again. People are calling you the Filipino Elvis. Rico wiped his eyes, his voice soft but sure. I don't want to be Elvis, sir. I just want to be a voice of hope, for my people, for my sister. That's enough for me. Later that evening, after the cameras stopped rolling and the lights dimmed, Rico sat alone in the dressing room. The noise from outside faded into a distant hum. He stared at himself in the mirror, at the tears drying on his cheeks, the exhaustion in his eyes, the disbelief etched into his smile. For the first time, he allowed himself to breathe. He took the photo of Laura from his pocket, pressing it gently against his chest. You see, baby girl, he whispered, your kuya did it. His mind replayed Simon's words over and over. Better than Elvis. It didn't feel real, but the truth wasn't in those words. It was in the reason behind them. Simon had seen something deeper than imitation. He'd seen heart. As he sat there, one of the crew members knocked on the door. Mr. Alvarez, you have a call. He followed her to a small office backstage where a tablet screen was waiting. On it was a live video call, his neighbor from Manila holding up a phone to Lara.
Kuya!
Lara's tiny face filled the screen, glowing with excitement. Her cheeks were wet with tears, but her smile stretched from ear to ear.
I saw you! I saw you sing! Everyone here was watching!
Even the barangay captain cried. Rico laughed, covering his face. Don't make me cry again, Laura. I've run out of tears, she giggled.
Simon Cowell said you're better than Elvis.
I told you, Kuya.
I told you he'd say something nice.
He chuckled softly, shaking his head. You were right, you always are. Then she held up a drawing to the screen, him on stage with golden light shining down, and her watching on TV with angel wings. I drew this, she said proudly, because I knew Mama and Papa were watching you too. His voice broke completely. I love you, Laura, more than you'll ever know. She smiled gently. Then sing again, Kuya. Sing until the whole world knows love like yours. That night, as Rico walked out of the studio into the cold Irish air, he stopped for a moment, staring up at the stars. The wind brushed against his face, and he could almost feel Manila's warmth in it. The prayers of his people, the heartbeat of his home. He thought of the journey that had brought him here, the street corners, the hunger, the laughter, the hope. Every hardship had led to this one sacred night. He knelt on the sidewalk, whispering a prayer. Lord, thank you. Not for the fame, not for the words, but for letting me carry my story through song. For giving me the chance to make her proud. He could almost hear his parents' voices in the wind, saying, we're proud of you, son. When he stood again, the city around him seemed quieter, almost reverent. He took a deep breath, clutching his guitar to his chest. The world had called him better than Elvis, but in his heart, he knew what that truly meant. It wasn't about comparison or glory. It meant that his pain had found purpose, that his songs, born from the dust of poverty and the fire of love, had reached where fame could never go. The human soul. As he returned to his hotel, the staff greeted him with smiles, some even clapping as he passed, but Rico only bowed his head humbly. He didn't feel like a star. He felt like a servant of love, of faith, of every broken heart that ever found hope in a song. In his room, he opened the window, letting the cold wind in. He strummed his guitar softly, singing the same song again, but this time just for himself. Take my hand, take my whole life too. The sound drifted into the Dublin night, echoing softly against the stone walls and dark sky. Down below, a passerby paused to listen, smiling without knowing who the singer was. And somewhere, halfway across the world, a little girl in Manila smiled in her sleep, hearing the same song in her dreams. Weeks passed since Rico Alvarez's breathtaking audition, but the moment, his trembling voice, Simon Cowell's words, and the tears that fell on that glittering stage, continued to ripple across the world like a heartbeat that refused to fade. Clips of his performance flooded social media. The Filipino Elvis who sang with heaven in his voice, a song that felt like a prayer. Within days the video reached millions of views. People everywhere, Filipino families abroad, children in small villages, strangers in faraway lands, found themselves crying to the same melody sung by a boy who once sang for coins in the streets. And yet, while the world saw fame, Rico saw something else entirely. To him every comment, every message wasn't about him, it was about her, his sister, his reason, his gentle flame. The morning after his performance aired on global television, Rico sat in his small Dublin apartment, still overwhelmed. His phone buzzed endlessly with notifications, calls and emails. Reporters wanted interviews, producers wanted deals and fans wanted songs. But Rico wasn't thinking about any of that. He was waiting for one message, the one that truly mattered. At last, a familiar video call tone rang out. He jumped to answer. Kuya. Lara's face filled the screen again. Her cheeks were rounder, her eyes brighter. She was in her hospital bed, but this time, she was smiling stronger than ever.
Lara?
Rico cried. You look better. How are you? She giggled, holding up her wrist with the hospital band. The doctors say I'm getting stronger.
Kuya!
They said my body's fighting back. I think it's because of your song. Rico pressed a hand to his heart, his voice trembling. It's because of your prayers, Lara. You're my miracle. She tilted her head, grinning. Kuya, everyone here knows you now. They keep playing your song on the hospital TV. Even the nurses cry when they hear it. They said your voice gives them hope. He smiled, wiping his eyes. Then let's give them more hope. I'm writing a new song. One for you, and for every heart that's ever hurt. Lara clapped her hands. What's it called? Rico hesitated, then smiled softly. The Gentle Flame. The days that followed were a blur of music and quiet prayers. Rico didn't chase fame, he simply followed the light that had always guided him. Love. He wrote songs late into the night, his guitar resting against his knee, candles flickering by his window. Each lyric was a promise, each melody a whisper of faith. He sang of mothers waiting for sons to return home, of little girls dreaming beyond illness, of fathers who still believed even when everything was lost. He sang of kindness that doesn't shout, and of love that never fades. When he finally performed The Gentle Flame on the semifinal stage, the theater fell silent before he even sang a note. He stood there, barefoot again, wearing the same old white shirt he'd worn on the streets of Manila. The lights dimmed. Then, softly he began. In the dark where dreams are small, one spark of love can light it all. A gentle flame, a guiding star, that tells you who you really are. The audience sat motionless, some in tears, some with their hands pressed to their hearts. On the judge's table, Simon Cowell leaned forward again, his eyes glassy. He didn't take notes this time, he didn't need to. By the time Rico reached the final line, even ashes can rise again. When love remembers your name. There wasn't a dry eye in the hall. The crowd rose to their feet as one. A standing ovation, not just for talent, but for truth. That night, Rico didn't return to his apartment. He went instead to a small chapel near the river Liffey, the same chapel where, weeks ago, he had prayed before auditioning. He sat in the same pew, his hands clasped, the sound of distant rain against the stained glass. Thank you, Lord, he whispered. Not for the success, not for the applause, but for the chance to bring a little light where there's darkness. He took out Lara's picture again and smiled through tears. You're my gentle flame, little one. You're why I sing. Behind him, a soft voice spoke. You know, a woman said, my son watched your audition. He's been fighting cancer for 2 years, he told me. Mama, if that boy from the Philippines can sing with all his heart, then maybe I can fight with all of mine. Rico turned, eyes wide. The woman smiled at him, tears glistening in her eyes. You don't just sing, young man, you heal. Rico bowed his head, too moved to speak. Weeks later came the grand finals. The stage was bigger, the lights brighter, but Rico stood as humbly as ever. The world was watching, yet all he could think about was one little girl, lying in a hospital bed, holding a tablet, whispering prayers for him across oceans. As the show began, the host asked him, Rico, you've inspired millions around the world. What does this moment mean to you? Rico smiled gently. I think it means love is louder than pain, and that kindness still matters. He took his guitar and began to play The Gentle Flame one last time, but halfway through, the music stopped. Rico looked up at the screen above the stage. His sister's live feed had appeared. Lara, wearing her hospital gown, was singing along softly from her bed. The audience gasped, watching her lips move in harmony with his. Simon Cowell's chin trembled. He whispered, this is beyond music. Together, brother and sister, one on stage, one on a screen, sang the final verse. Their voices blended into something pure, unshakable, divine. When life is cold and hope feels gone, keep shining, love, keep holding on. You are the light, the heart, the flame, the gentle flame that burns my name. Silence, then thunderous applause. People rose, crying openly. Simon stood, Louis stood, and the world watched a miracle unfold. The next morning, Rico received a message from the hospital. Lara's condition had stabilized. The doctors said her spirit seemed unexplainably stronger. He smiled through his tears, whispering, that's my little angel. Months later, after the show ended, Rico didn't move to Hollywood or London. He went home, to Manila. He rebuilt his old street corner into a small open-air cafe called The Gentle Flame. On the walls hung photos from his journey, his audition, his performance, and one special picture. Him and Lara standing under a neon sign that read, Sing with your heart. Every night, he performed, not for fame but for love. For the people who still believed in miracles, for those who needed a song to remind them they weren't alone, and when children came up to him saying, Kuya Rico, I want to sing like you, he smiled and said, then sing for someone, not for something. That's how your flame will never die. Years later, even after his fame faded and the lights dimmed, people still remembered him, not as the Filipino Elvis, not as a viral star, but as the boy who sang to heal the world. His voice, his story, his kindness, they lived on in every heart he had touched. And somewhere, in a small cafe in Manila, under the soft glow of candlelight, an old guitar still strummed the melody of The Gentle Flame, reminding everyone that even the smallest light can warm the coldest night.